So you've mentioned a few times classroom environment and bringing in different types of seating and different stuff like that, and I understand there's also the model classroom at Seaview, which is very low-key, only colors from nature, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a motion with the classroom environment being a big part of Tier 1 to change how classrooms look, particularly in primary grades, which tend to be busy, lots of color? Is that something that, like, I understand schools have gone and seen the classroom? Is it up to the teachers to then adopt those ideas? Or is there a push from the teams or from the district to use, to standardize and make those changes to support the work that's happening here?
I think before we turn over to Dave to answer that, I think we're going to get a plug for your next session, I think.
Yes, and also an invite for you and for everyone here, actually. We have a district secondary self-regulation room started here at Dover as well. And so we could show you that afterwards, everyone who wants to come and have a look at it. I know after last session, we did walk through that area, and we also walked down to our 21st Century Learning Center that we have that we're developing too. It's about enhancing facilities for learning. That's a key. That's one of our strategic goals. And so that's what our focus is going to be here. Every opportunity that we get to be able to show people, if they don't get it, well, we want to say, well, this is kind of what it looks like. And so in these areas, we want to be able to show people some examples of what we might be able to bring back into every classroom. And I just wanted to add one other piece to the whole Tier 1 intervention. I think there's maybe a bit of a misnomer. An intervention isn't just for some people. RTI is for everyone. RTI is for 100% of our students, not just for students who, in fact, we believe need some special intervention. Everyone deserves it. Everyone has a right to it. And so at Tier 1 level, we need to be providing a stimulating environment, something that's engaging to all of our students, and not just the students who are struggling, but the students who, in fact, need something more. And so that's what I know that first level, we all wrap around, we all try to do the best we can as teachers and as administrators to try and change the environments, adjust our practice, start researching, becoming readers about what's the most effective strategies, and adopting those new 21st century skills and practices in our classrooms. So that's a big part of Tier 1.
I think you can fill in those.
Yeah, really good points. Again, it gets to the heart of the idea that it's about preventing failure. It's about getting out ahead of it, and universally. So those practices, to answer your question, from my perspective, that's exactly what we want. We want, and we created what I would call a training and development center at Seaview. We're not requiring every teacher in the system to go there and learn about what we're doing. What we're trying to do is link that training and development center to the work of the teams. So as they study the classroom situation, and to go to Bob's point again, we often focus on individual students, but as we all know, we can have entire classrooms that are completely dysregulated. We can have entire schools that are completely dysregulated. So what you want to do is create these training and development centers and then encourage people as they're problem solving around how do I fix this problem in this classroom to go there and check it out. So they can actually go there and then apply that knowledge and that practice with real live students in real live classrooms in order to manage the improvement of learning. So that would be my goal as the superintendent, is to try to move our classrooms toward the environmental considerations that you need to worry about when you're looking at some very basic emotional regulation tools or supports. Because you're right, so many of our classrooms can be overstimulating. A lot of our students suffer from sensory overload. Some of the best people to get into classrooms to help you understand that would be folks like occupational therapists. So you need to create, through that environment, a much more calming kind of circumstance for kids. and then embed within that environment other tools that they can select, like swivel chairs or rockers, or we even put in one of my classrooms pacing strips on the floor for kids who like to walk. There's where you walk. Go for it. So I think to answer your question, that is the hope, is that as the teams work and apply the solutions to the problems that they're struggling with, that will be the way that we transform our classrooms.
And I think, and it's really important that parents do hear this message, because we as parents are so accustomed to walking into these beautifully decorated classrooms, and we think, wow, what a beautiful place for my child to be. And it's going to be different when we start seeing a classroom that's a little bit calmer in its visual setting. So it's kind of important for parents to get that word too, so they're not like, what's wrong with that teacher? Why isn't she decorating? You know, it's about creating a learning environment that's very positive. So it is important that parents get this education as well.
So you do bring up occupational therapists. I'm just curious why there isn't an occupational therapist on your team, because sensory integration and disorders are huge.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't identify, and they're very hard to identify sometimes and delineate. So I'm just curious why there's no OTs on.
We have something better than an OT.
Well, are you talking about Brenda,
That
or?
would be it.
Yes. Well, we do have a consultant who's working with us now, who's actually setting up that classroom and brings a lot of that insight. But I do, in answer to your question, though, what's that? Oh, she's a speech path.
But that's very different to an occupational therapist.
It is. She's worked a lot with OTs, though, so she's blended a lot of their discipline with hers. But I think, to answer your question, we need OTs,
Yeah.
right? And we don't have them. So we do work with the health authority, but that's only on specific cases with certain children. What we need to think about doing as a system is building some OTs into our teams who work with schools and work with classrooms. So it's a good point.
Because I just struck with a child with major sensory issues,
Mm-hmm.
and then if a speech therapist is practicing OT things, first of all, there's a huge problem there, and she can overload so badly. So we had to go and pay for an OT, and even then we had to pay for the OT to come to the school to help implement. And even that, the school didn't really want to do anything, right? So, but she has huge roles in and my daughter was able to just totally self-regulate with her.
Right, which is why we need them.
Is this a question of budget, why there haven't been any included in the?
I don't think it's a question of budget. I think it's a question of how we've traditionally responded.
Because other school districts have them.
Yes, yeah,
Couch and Comox does.
yeah.
You really, and I understand, you know, I've worked with some students in different situations where an OT has made such a difference in my classroom by giving me that knowledge. I will say, Brenda has historically been a speech language pathologist, but her knowledge of sensory elements, her knowledge of how to integrate those successfully in a classroom environment is not what you would traditionally expect of a speech path, but that's because she as a person has been so proactive, and I think she's speaking at one of your future symposiums, the next session.
Yeah.
What's her last name?
Brenda Wideneering, which is probably one of the words I don't say properly, but, and she's really good at looking at connecting those elements with metacognition and the routines and the environment of classroom and instructional practices. So I really think if you come listen to her, you're going to be really engaged in what she's helping us as a district learn about.
But she is just one person, right? And there are 4 teams for all the different
And
levels.
that's why every team has been to, Chris, has your team been to the classroom yet? But other the teams are all going and working with Brenda. She's doing multiple in-services throughout the district. So she is really working on building our capacity in that area. So it's, everybody's hard at work building that knowledge. So just thinking about Tier 3, despite our work in Tier 1, it's where we're focusing our efforts. We want to do the best job we can there. Tier 2, for our students, we are going to have those students who are going to need that intensive, individualized support, and us being ready to and prepared to support them. in the different areas, starting first with their metacognition, the environment, supporting them to be in the classrooms, doing everything we can to be successful, but also being able to support the needs of those students. And, you know, Dave did mention earlier, sometimes it's a whole classroom that we're really working at focusing on this level. Lynn's nodding. You know, we've worked with and partnered with classrooms who needed that intensive support for a whole classroom environment. And that's part of the work that we're doing with Tier 3. Should be less than 5% of our students that we're looking at once we get things really moving and get our, you know, kind of get things, it takes a couple years. Like I said, it's a journey. But it doesn't, you mentioned earlier about students who are gifted. And this is kind of an outside the box kind of thinking. I like what Bob mentioned first. We always have to start with making our classroom learning experience. And classroom I use very broadly because it's not always inside four walls. And I think the teams here at Dover will tell you learning happens a lot outside but that environment, those learning experiences, providing some really rich opportunities for engagement and enrichment embedded in our work. Sometimes students struggle in one area, but they can just excel in another area. And it's about, as a district and as schools, being really empowered to let that happen. But in a very rare instance, there could be students who are so bright that we can't, despite all the enrichment we're doing, we may want to give them opportunity to do a university level course as part of those types of work. So that's a way that we could think about this, that would be more individualized for those students. But even with that, we always want to start by making our first learning experiences as rich as we can and provide engagement and enrichment embedded in that. Is there anything that your team would like to add to that, sort of that outside the box kind of thinking?
I can't help but think we have students in our school who are incredibly gifted, who are filmmakers. Providing opportunities that go beyond the regular classroom is a huge piece, right? And not only just changing the shape and size and the way that we do our things in our classroom, providing things like project-based learning, the type of model that we'd like to be able to see here next year, is just another option. It's not for everyone, because it isn't needed for everyone, but everyone needs some kind of options. And that's the part about Tier 1 that is, it's not just for those kids who are having challenges sitting still. It's for folks who, in fact, need something more, need another type of option. And I know that providing opportunities for students to create film and to go off to university courses and to connect within the community a little bit more in a different way at a different time of the day is probably the thing that we need to start thinking about. So well, and something to celebrate here in the school. And again, when we think back to that